Before I left the bank, I asked my financial planner, hey, do you invest in portfolios? And I'll never forget what happened. So in a previous video, I was talking about streamlining my accounts and downsizing everything so it's nice and simple, and how I got away from using one of the big banks. If you haven't seen that video, I'll leave a link to it up here. So today I'm going to talk about a couple things. One, how I got to that point, a little bit of background to that. And then in part two, I'm going to talk about where I put my investments now and what I've invested in. So during my journey, I was learning a lot about personal finance just by reading. I read this one book called Money Master the Game, and it was by Tony Robbins. So in that book, there's an entire chapter or two that talks about mutual funds and why they're kind of scammy. Essentially, they charge you a ton of fees to manage a portfolio when really your financial planner is just kind of there selling you a product. I read that part of the book and I thought, no, I felt that was pretty smart when I was choosing my mutual funds. Now keep in mind that, in my opinion, I have been very responsible with my money. I haven't wasted a lot of it, and I was even smart enough to invest in portfolios when I was in my early 20s. I am also, in my opinion, not intimidated by charts, graphs, math, percentages, and I was able to read all of those fact sheets and not be too intimidated by the numbers. I was doing my due diligence and investing my money in TFSAs and RRSPs, which are the equivalents of Roth IRAs and traditional IRAs, and I had them all in portfolios. Now, in Tony's book, he talks about how the market, which he describes as the S&P 500. Now, the S&P 500 are the top 500 companies in the United States. Those are the guys that you want to be comparing your portfolio against, because in theory, those are the best. So Tony was talking about how portfolio managers can never consistently beat the S&P 500. And that it was just more prudent to invest in the market when you're looking for long-term growth. That's key, long-term. It's better to invest in the market than to try and beat it and buy what portfolio managers are trying to sell you. Now again, I thought, well, I felt I was picking pretty good portfolios. They were all supposed to be aggressive growth, and sure enough, my accounts have gone up over the years. But man, was I surprised when I looked at the fees. Now before I go any further, I just want to make sure you guys know I'm not bashing portfolio managers, I'm not bashing financial planners. Your investments are all about what you're comfortable with. So if that's what makes you comfortable and you like to sit down face to face with someone, that's fine. That was like me as well. But now that I've read a little bit more and I'm a little more comfortable with risk, I've decided to change things. There's also more opportunities available now. So there's nothing wrong with doing that, but in this day and age, the game has changed. When I started, online investing wasn't accessible to everybody. The internet was still relatively new, it wasn't as user-friendly, and you didn't have as many choices with online brokerages. The other thing is I didn't know what exchange-traded funds were, or ETFs. Exchange-traded funds are groups of companies that are related somehow, usually in a certain industry or maybe a certain geography. You'll find them grouped in different ways. So if you have an online brokerage account, you can invest in these groups of companies and kind of mimic portfolios if you really wanted to. And heck, now, online brokerages offer portfolios at the fraction of the fees that big banks do. Remember that big banks have to pay for buildings and rent, whereas these online brokerages, they have really low operating costs, so they can keep their fees really low. So I requested some summary sheets from my financial planner at the bank. Lo and behold, I looked at my sheets and I was paying something like 2.42% in MERs, or management expense ratios. Doesn't seem like a big number, but that is the percent that I'm paying no matter how my portfolio does. Let's say my MER was 2%. If my portfolio manages to gain 10%, 2% off the top goes to my bank. If my portfolio loses 10%, another 2% still goes off and goes to the bank. So the bank is winning either way. I should probably invest in banks. My planner sent me a sheet like this, and it has all this data about my account. In the next video, I will go through every piece of data that's on the sheet to help you guys out if you have similar summary sheets that you're trying to make sense of. But the one thing I am going to focus on the most in that video will be this, the performance curve here. Now, that is where a lot of the tricks of this sheet lie, in my opinion. This performance curve shows you a red line and then a benchmark, and usually demonstrates that the fund is doing better than the benchmark, but it doesn't define what that benchmark is. It's not the S&P 500, which is what I assumed. And it also, in my case, a lot of the times underperform that benchmark. The biggest thing to remember about that chart is it doesn't represent how that particular account has performed in the last 10 years. It only shows you what the portfolio did. I wasn't in that portfolio for 10 years, so that performance wasn't indicative of what I was actually getting as a return on my investment. Hey guys, if you're liking this video so far, please hit that subscribe button. The channel's really small right now and I could really use your support, so please hit that button. I'll give you a second to do that right now. So I read some more. I took this sheet into my financial planner and I basically bled all over this. I was like, what is this? What is? I asked my financial planner all these questions and I think he realized I was starting to get smart about this. So he said, let me put together a proposal for you with a lower management expense ratio, a lower management fee. And I said, okay, that's fine. But in my head, I was already kind of annoyed. Why was it that he was waiting for me to catch this and get annoyed with the fees before he did something right for me? If I hadn't said anything, he was just happy to leave this portfolio as is. He invests things very passively. In the next video, I'm going to get into that proposal that he sent me, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you'll be notified about that one. So he did send me that proposal. I looked it over. I still decided that I didn't want to stay with this bank. I was kind of over it. And the more research I did, the more it just made sense that I could go to an ETF that mimics the S&P 500, and that does exist, and I chose to move my money to Questrade. I invested in a fund called the VSP.TO, which is basically a Vanguard fund mimicking the S&P 500, and it uses derivatives to sort of cancel out the exchange rate factor of investing in US companies. So it basically mimics the S&P 500 for me, even though I'm investing Canadian dollars. As far as my financial planner goes, well, I did go in, I did let him know that I'm gonna be shopping around. He offered to look at certain ETFs if I ran into them and had questions, which was very nice of him. However, I knew that these guys who work at the banks are kind of limited to funds and products that the bank provides. Your financial planner doesn't have the freedom to go in and get certain stocks for you. He only has an array of products that the bank offers to him. And those products are managed by other portfolio managers that are higher up in the bank. Now, if you're in this situation and you're thinking about getting out of the big banks and moving to something else, or even moving to another bank, the nice thing is, if you're like me and hate confrontation, you don't even have to go back into the bank. You actually just have to go to the new brokerage or bank that you want to use, and you fill out a few forms and they will withdraw your money and close your accounts for you. So that's great. Even though I kind of put my financial planner on notice, I went ahead, I went to Questrade and I moved all my money over. I invested in the S&P 500 for my accounts, and now I'm sitting and basically putting my investments on autopilot. One last time, guys, I just want to stress that I'm not bashing financial planners. They are very good and useful if you don't have a lot of education about investments, but I think it's good for people to be aware of the types of fees that you could be getting charged. For all the accounts that I had with my bank, I was paying about $6,000 in fees every year. My suggestion is, if you do really like sitting face-to-face with someone to discuss your financial plans, you could go to a private brokerage, a private firm that does the same type of financial planning. Typically, they can offer you very competitive rates and low management fees. You can also go into your bank and try to see if they can restructure your portfolio to give you something with lower fees, or you can go online and use an online brokerage like I did. But whatever you do, make sure that that brokerage or firm or bank is insured by the Canadian government or the American government, so your money is safe. At the end of the day, guys, you gotta do what's comfortable for you. Before I left the bank, I asked my financial planner, hey, do you invest in portfolios? And I'll never forget what happened. He kind of sat back and he stared at the wall, and then he looked at me and he said, well, Sean, I use what I learn at work every day to manage my money myself. My financial planner didn't even use his own portfolios, so even he knew that the fees were ridiculous. And I bet you that your planner probably does the same thing. Now, you guys know I don't like paying fees for no reason, and this guy did offer me something that was a little bit more competitive, but at the end of the day, he couldn't beat the online brokerages. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys have found this story useful. I hope it helps you in your own personal finance journey. Next time, I'm gonna do part 2 of this video where I go through this sheet and break down all the data that's on it so that you're aware of what you're looking at. If you like this video, please hit the like button and leave a comment below if you have any questions. Until next time, spread the wealth, and I'll see you in the next one.